After a narcissistic and abusive romantic partner cheated on her with multiple women and left her in the country with significant unexpected bad debt and ruined credit, she was forced to rebuild her life, her credit, and her trust in herself. Over the next few years, she navigated the challenging world of foreclosure court, filing for financial proposals, and divorce. During these times, she adopted a minimalist lifestyle, leaned on her personal network, and practiced radical personal forgiveness, acceptance, and responsibility. And she joins me via Zoom from Alberta, Canada, to share her story. This is a Time with Fred podcast.
It's timely, it's insightful, it's motivating, it's empowering. It's Time with Fred, your inspirational broadcast with host Fred Gaddy.
And so my guest today on the Time with Fred podcast is Candice Smiley. Candice, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Fred.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. Candice, every now and then I would think that I've heard it all, but I get stumped ever so often with stories such as yours, and I really couldn't help but just marvel at how one goes through a challenging situation like that and doesn't allow the situation to keep them down, right? Not to say that it's easy by any means, but how did this happen, or how did this start for you? You mind taking us back?
I can take you back. Yeah, for sure. I think it happened, or at least the setup to have met someone like this and get myself into that kind of a situation, which, to be honest with you, Fred, was something that hindered me from talking about this for a very long time, because I didn't want to be asked, like, how did you get here?
Mm-hmm.
Which I've now come to understand is oftentimes, just general curiosity from people, or they want to avoid the situation themselves. And so they're not asking to accuse, they're asking, to self-preserve. So I think a lot of it happened because, there were certain circumstances that happened previous to this that I didn't do a lot of the personal work to do some healing on. And, for those who have checked out my story, I read my full bio. There were certainly what I would call plot twists in my life, things I didn't see coming, wasn't really prepared for, had no awareness of how to deal with it afterwards. But because of that, and because I just sort of kept limping my way through it, not really willing to admit what had happened, whether that was because I was afraid of what people might say, my own, self-belief, which is a big deal, right? Some of those things that happened really did shatter the belief I had in myself. And so when you start to question, you set yourself up for people who may not necessarily be bad people, but everybody makes some choices. And I certainly got caught up with somebody who wasn't making a lot of wise choices. And that came after a 4.5-year relationship. So 4.5 years of time when I should have been able to trust this person, and instead, discovered a lot of this stuff after the relationship had ended, after he'd left the country. And it sort of just went from bad to worse, to be completely honest with you, when I was going through that.
I must say, Candice, that it's very bold of you, first of all, to come out and share your story. I think it takes a significant deal of vulnerability, because there are a lot of people, like you rightly said, who would rather not broach the subject at all, not want to visit the painful past. And so for you to share your story with the world and being as open and candid as you are, is really laudable. So why did you decide to share a story with the world, Candice?
Well, because I read once that our stories of survival become someone's roadmap. And I've thought a lot about that, I have a lot of respect for whether they're authors or speakers, men and women who have the courage to share their stories. They had an impact on how I moved through mine. And I love this quote by her name's Muriel. And she says, "What would happen if one woman told the truth about her life? The world would split open." And when I read that, at the time, my world very much was splitting open. And I felt like I was learning truths about myself and about other people and those sorts of things, that it was not a pleasant thing to have it split open. However, now on the other side, after years of healing and personal work, I have discovered that in telling the truth, just because things are splitting open doesn't mean they won't come back together more beautifully than they were before. I think too, sometimes truth is not convenient. In fact, most of the time it isn't convenient. But I wasn't aware that people like this existed. I grew up in an amazing family where, my grandpa would have tanned my hide if I used somebody the way I've been used. And I think that, some of the upbringing has had a huge impact on how I've been able to respond, because I did have an amazing base to start from. No necessarily knowledge of how to deal with it when I was in it. And even for them going, I don't know how to help you with this, but at least I had the grounding. And so I think I want to tell the story so that other people are aware. And because I think, if one other person who's maybe going through something similar or aligns in some way to a part of my story, that they won't give up, that they'll continue to do the work to come out on the other side.
I'm sure our listeners will be curious, and if there's any question, I'm sure they'll want to ask you first of all. Is how did you deal with this, or how did you overcome this? And I'm sure it didn't happen overnight, right? I'm sure
No.
it took years, right? And
Yeah.
making. I'm sure even until now you probably deal with some of those painful memories, but
Yeah.
it was one thing just going, dealing with abuse, but then there was also a significant amount of debt and how to go
Mhm.
through foreclosure and all that. How do you cope? How do you deal with all of that?
Well, I can remember, before I heard about the cheating and that sort of thing, and I had just begun to discover the mess of the financial debt that I had been left with. And I can remember lying awake at night and the whole bed was shaking and I was drenched in a cold sweat because I had no idea and was just absolutely terrified of what I was now walking into and didn't see a way out of. And there really wasn't a way out except through. If you're going through hell, just go straight through, right? So that was kind of where I was at. But along the way, I met some really amazing people who were certainly supportive. I do wish now that I had been able to be a little more vulnerable, because people were a lot kinder than I thought they were. Even I remember being in foreclosure court at one point, and I mean, I had no idea. I sort of was left with this property and I needed to deal with it, and that's a long story. But even the other side was sympathetic, to the story when I told it, because it was truth. As outlandish as it sounded, even as I was telling it, it's true. And I've noticed that when you tell the truth, people go, "Oh, okay." And, so they were kind, even when the situations weren't awesome. How did I deal with it? How did I cope? I think a lot of it was, I knew that the best revenge was a life well lived. And I can remember standing in my house as I was realizing the mess that I was in. And I didn't want this person to win, and it's interesting because they still call every year just to see how I'm doing. It's really entertaining to me now. I laugh about it now. But, I didn't want to, like, there had to be a silver lining. Does that make sense? I had to make something good come of it. Otherwise, it was just going to be a horrible experience that I had to live through. And so I guess it's because I was doggedly determined, A, to get through it, and B, to get through it well with some dignity intact, that I did. And, maybe that's that backbone, like I said, the foundation that was there, that was like, this might suck, but so is staying where I am.
Yeah. Was there a particular mindset that you had to get into, right, or frame of mind to kind of help you deal with this? I mean, it's one
Very
thing
much
saying,
so.
being positive or whatever, but in your case, were there any particular mindset tools or anything that helped?
Yeah. I journaled a lot. So if I was honest in one place, it was there. I started to be honest with myself because I didn't necessarily know how to be honest with other people. And a lot of other people in my world didn't necessarily know how to deal with it. And there was a lot of sort of, I don't know how to help you. And so I realized I would probably find people that could help me with various elements of it, but I would need to be honest. And so I was honest first with myself when I was mad, when I was overwhelmed, when I was tired, that sort of thing. And I worked through a lot of that. And again, I think it was this dogged determination that at one point, and I mean, if you read parts of my story, there was, I lived through 100% of my other bad days. And I have some, stuff that I lived through before that I was kind of leaning on that I was like, well, I made it through that, so I'll make it through this. And I really did believe that not necessarily in karma per se, but that what goes up must come down, and the vice versa, right? Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It is what it is. And so I leaned on some of these ideas that, if I'd lost this significant amount of money, then maybe one day I could earn it back and then some, because now I was getting that beautiful, priceless gift we call wisdom, which you only get when you get your teeth kicked in. And so I figured, one day I'll hopefully have my weight worth gold of that then I could use and apply. And wouldn't it be awesome if, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, I can use it and say, this was supposed to break me. It didn't. It shaped me into this gorgeous person that I am today. I didn't let it define me. And in fact, I'm using it now to make a radical positive impact.
Wow, what a powerful background there. Candice, what do you say to those of us who go through life and want to be so guarded, right? We don't want to let anyone into our inner circle for obvious reasons. And so we go through these moments, these challenging moments, and we keep people out because we don't want them in a business. And then, we struggle. We carry this load by ourselves until it gets us to a point where we can't take it anymore. Oftentimes it's too late, unfortunately. And I get why folks don't want other people in the business. They want to, but what do you say to those who just have that mindset, right? This is just my life, and I'm not going to let anyone. I'm just going to carry this load the best way I can.
That was me for a very long time. So I think I'd have a lot of empathy and compassion for them. Certainly after various, plot twists that had happened in my life, I had, not just built a wall around myself. I'd certainly built a wall, and then I dug a moat, and then I put a drawbridge in, and, there was no way anybody was getting in. The challenge with that is it's a lonely existence. And that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to have happen. And we as humans are meaning making machines, right? We apply a meaning to everything. And I'd often think about that. Like, what if I reapplied the meaning I'm giving to this? So I've been told that going through foreclosure is a horrible thing and now you're ruined. Well, maybe I'm not. Maybe this is just another learning tool, right? Because either you win or you learn. And so thankfully I had been highly invested in personal development and have continued to, often because I couldn't afford, to go to therapy or some of these things, but those resources exist in a lot of cheap or affordable or even free resources. And so I was tuned into a lot of that, usually just looking for relief, right? Something to help me through this, help me shift the mindset. And so a lot of times I realized I was having a negative reaction, not because of the thing that happened, right? The thing that happened months before or years before, but I was still telling myself a story about that. And I kept reliving it and reliving it and reliving it and reliving it. And that was part of the radical responsibility and acceptance that comes because, I could forgive the person, but if I didn't accept it, once I shifted into, okay, this is the way it is, I certainly could wish that it was different. It'd be nice if it was different, but it's not. And so I'm wasting very valuable energy on what I could be putting on resources and looking for resources and opportunities and solutions. I'm spending in guilt. I'm spending in shame. I'm spending in very low energy thoughts that aren't moving me forward. And so for me, I would start to live in, okay, let's pretend that I'm not overwhelmingly in debt. Let's pretend I'm not heartbroken. Let's pretend I'm not, wondering why, these 4 women had anything, better than I did. And to be honest, I'd met most of them. I remember thinking to myself, you're no different than me. You're no better. You're no worse. They were very people. And I remember thinking, this is actually really powerful because people don't cheat because of who you are. They cheat because of who they are. And that was freeing. And I was like, okay, I'm done with that. Moving on to the next thing. It wasn't anything I did. And then same thing with sort of the situations. My mistake was trusting someone and not trusting myself when my gut went off that said, I don't know if I have asked enough questions. And even though we've been in a relationship for a while and I should be able to trust you, maybe I need to do my own due diligence. And so it took me from somebody who would have said, I'm a victim and this happened to me saying, it happened. It was quite an experience. I'll probably write a book about it one day. Hopefully I can make some money on that. And in the meantime, I've learned a lot. I've gained some wisdom, met some cool people. I have a cool story, and I'm still here. So and to be honest, it's given me a feeling of bravery, I guess, courage. Because when other people are afraid, to make a sales call or try a new business or fall in love again, I think I've been through stuff that I thought was going to destroy me and it didn't. So this probably won't. So let's try. And so, and to be honest, my life is bigger and better because of it.
Yeah, what doesn't kill you makes you only stronger, right?
Legitimately.
Exactly. You touched on forgiveness there, which is one of those big things, Candace, that many of us just can't seem to do. Um, and in your case, I mean, you had every reason not to. But how did that journey of forgiveness turn out for you? I mean, how did it play out? How did you do that? I mean, I'm asking all these questions because I know, people who've been wronged, not even to the level of what you experienced, but who just made up their minds they're just never gonna forget. I know the spiritual benefits. I know the health
But I'm just going to be
benefits
mad
of
anyway.
forgiveness,
Yes.
right? Exactly. But why was it important for you to choose to forgive?
To be honest with you, Fred, the moment that I was actually finally able to forgive, because I held on to it for a long time, was when I became pregnant with my daughter.
Hmm.
And I think it's because at that point I was really conscious of the fact that I was housing another human being, and not just another human being, but she was being created.
Hmm.
And I was curious, as woo as that might sound, at the impact of what I might be holding on to in a negative sense. And would that science, proving it or not, would that have an impact on her life? And did I want that person who wronged me to have any kind of impact
Hmm.
on her beautiful, innocent life? And the answer was a hard no.
Hmm.
And so it became very easy to practice forgiveness, not even for me, but for her.
Yes.
And I think that had a huge impact on how I've continued to move forward, because letting go of it was actually the easy part. The acceptance part of what was, and some of the constraints financially, et cetera, that I lived with for years following, were more frustrating because they were sort of constant reminders of what had happened. But at the end of the day, again, we apply meaning, and so we hurt ourselves. And so a lot of it was just coming to this place of, it happened. What can I learn from it today? I'm reminded, great. What can I be grateful for? And so it was a very conscious decision. There was nothing, um, went to the beach one day and tossed it in the sea and it went away. No, there was a habit of thinking that got me in that place. And there was a habit of thinking new thoughts that got me to the place where I don't think about it now, except to maybe tell the story without any emotional hit.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also just a lot of people that I've spoken to on this podcast, Candice, who found their purpose from the challenges that they went through, whether it was a painful divorce, like your case, or abuse, or bankruptcy, or whatever. And out of those very painful memories, they found their purpose, right? And so what they do now was as a result of those painful experiences that they had. Um, when we go through those painful experiences, we loathe them. We don't want them. They're not fun. They're not pleasurable, right? But there's always that you called it the silver lining. There's always that perspective that we can glean from those experiences. How much of that is true in your case, or was true in your case?
100%.
Hmm.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't want to go through it again for
Hmm.
sure. But I think about my own experience, and because, especially now that I've been sharing it, but certainly before that, I think I recognized certainly in other women when they were going through something and maybe didn't trust their partner and stuff like that. And because of what I'd gone through, I dealt with it differently, right? If someone came to me and says, I think my partner's cheating, I no longer brushed that out under the rug. And I went, maybe have a conversation, right? And that would inspire change, or that would inspire, big change. So I think I began to approach the world just very, very differently. And I've recommended, I had some great support people who walked me through the scary financial part of that, which people often deal with in one way or another, as you were saying. And I've been able to come to people and say, why didn't you call so and so? They helped me out when I was in a predicament. They can probably help you out with your smaller predicament. And that's felt good, because even in that small way, I've been able to make an impact. And so if it's meant to be for good, at some point, it's just part of the story. It's just one more chapter.
Mm. One of the questions I like to ask of my guests is what defines them, and I've heard so many, especially for those who've been through some of these challenging moments of life. And if I were to ask you, Candice, what defines you, what would that answer be?
What defines me? Well, I think that one of the things I've taken time to do, certainly post this, is to define my values. So to know, what words might I could maybe apply to what I would say would define me. And I really love words. I always have. Words meant a lot to me through part of my life when I knew what my name meant, and I felt like my mother would not have been, led to that name if it wasn't meant to be for me, and the impact that that had. I think we create our world with our word. And that, of course, starts with what we're saying to ourselves in, the quiet of our minds and our hearts. And so, one of the things that came up for me when you were saying that is freedom.
Mm,
That's one of my core values. Having known what it's like to not have freedom, right? And financially, we're run by a lot of things in the world,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and how free it feels now to not be held down by unforgiveness or guilt or
mm-hmm.
shame or any of those things. I'm living quite out loud. I don't mind discussing just about anything. There's nothing that um, would do that. So that would be one of the words that certainly, would define me. I think about some of the things that I stand for: collaboration, connection, communication. These are paramount, certainly in my podcasting career, and, why I come out and connect and talk to other people. It matters. And then I think about things like compassion, because I think one of the things it's given me is compassion, because we don't know what other people are going through. And for a long time, I didn't talk about it. And so people knew I was guarded, or they, had an unconscious sense that they couldn't trust me. And that was because I couldn't trust myself. So it wasn't that I was dishonest or had any intention to screw anybody. But when you're not in integrity, when you're hiding that kind of a secret, or you're working through some stuff, that has a big impact. And so, I might say words like integrity would come into play, in that. And I'm grateful that at this point, especially now that I've started telling my story and
Mm-hmm.
just telling it candidly whenever the opportunity arises, that my life is in integrity.
Yeah.
It's living and breathing and doing. It's just all the same thing.
If you were to ask me to come up with a name for what you do, I would say Candid Candice, right? Not sure if it's crossed your mind before, but anyway,
Yeah.
that's me being corny. But
Mhm.
on a more serious note, the work that you do, create the ripple. Can you tell listeners a little bit about the work that you do and the
Yeah.
impact
And I
that
think
that it's
it's
having? Yeah.
it's a podcast right now. Certainly there's some intention to grow. I started as an entrepreneur, as an event planner, and so I had a company. It was Create the Ripple Events. And again, it kind of goes back to that connection, collaboration, communication. These, I think, are really key things, and we do that when we come together, whether it's one-on-one or in a much bigger sense. Certainly now with the podcast, it's about sharing the story, and
Mm-hmm.
I love having conversations that matter. Yes, there's a lot of C's in there, but I do conversations that matter. They take courage, and we need more of that right now. We need more, like you say, the candid conversations. We do. We just, we live in a world of filters where everything is very pretty. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
my life is not very pretty. There's an Instagram shot. That's really
Mm-hmm.
pretty. But
Mm-hmm.
the rest of it, is not that pretty. And that's okay. There is, surprisingly a lot of life that is really unremarkable. And there is something remarkable about that when there's no drama and that sort of thing. And of course, there is plans to do some bigger scale events, and hopefully one day things like the Create the Ripple campaign, because there was at one time a time when I wasn't able to honor my word the way I wanted to financially. I felt very strapped for resources, energetically, emotionally, financially, you name it. I felt very depleted, and there were some amazing people who came alongside, often without asking for anything, whether it was energy, time, money, you name it. And they walked with me through that. And I would like to one day return that in a big way, and hopefully start a movement on the same for those people that stand by us when we are not at our best.
Yeah. Paying it forward. Absolutely. Candice, there's someone listening to us right now, or listening to your story, and it's bringing back memories, right? Maybe they may be dealing with something right now. They may be stuck. Whatever they may have gone through may have kept them down. They may be dealing with regret. They may be hating themselves. They may be hating the other person. They just may not have the strength right now to even move forward. Um, what do you say to that person?
It gets better. It doesn't get better today. It may not get better for a while, but that's okay. I think back to my own experience, I knew it was going to be bad, and I knew it was going to be bad for a while. Whether that was in the way that I was dealing with it, I knew it would hurt for a while. I figured if it was going to hurt and be bad, I may as well just let it be rather than looking for a band aid, rather than looking for something that would be a quick fix. I figured it was better to just sort of sit and deal with it than not. And I think that that was a really big blessing that I didn't know I was giving myself, was sort of the acknowledgement that I am where I am, and it's not pretty, and it's taken me a while to get here, even if I didn't know I was getting there. And that happened, quickly in terms of my awareness. Um, but that you get to take all the time in the world to get to the other side. You will get there. Um, you'll need to do the work. You'll need to own it. It won't be fun. You'll be mad. You'll be sad. You might even be angry. I know I got angry for a long time. And then one day it just won't be so bad. That's the nature of who we are, especially if you're committed to healing. And it's okay. It's okay if, like with one part of my story, if it takes you 19 or 20 years before you start talking about it, or 5 years or 6 years or 10 years, but you will get there. And then when you get there, enjoy it. And so if you're sitting there and it sucks right now and you can't yet imagine when it will be better, I'm letting you know from the other side, it is better. It does get better, but just go through it right now.
Mm.
And I know that that doesn't necessarily, that's not the band-aid or pretty things that I think most people want to hear. But I know for me, I had to speak truth to myself. And there was a lot of relief in sort of just coming to acknowledge what was rather than trying to imagine it away. Even if I did create some goals and mindsets and work on where I wanted to go, there was a lot of power in acknowledging where I was and then where I wanted to go and just begin to work for the two, slow and steady.
Mm. Powerful words, Candice. So, if you were to give any advice to your younger self, what would you tell that person?
Lots of things.
Maybe,
Don't
maybe,
date
maybe.
the guy. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Um, no, I've thought about this a lot, to be honest. And I think I would tell her, you'll be okay. And I think that's advice I would give to just about anybody who is younger, whether it's, heading into your teen years, because those are bad, right? Whether it's heading into your 20s where you don't know who you are and you make dumb decisions that you pay for in your 30s. I would say you're going to be okay. And in the meantime, figure out who you are and figure out your values. So I wish I'd figured out my values sooner. I wish I'd done a values exercise because they were going to change. Of course they were. But I would just encourage myself to love me more because I may have still gotten into some of these relationships that, caused some big wounding, but I don't think I would have stayed as long. And so the lessons would have been shorter, even if I'd lived the lessons anyway, because I don't necessarily know I'd want to save my younger self from all the lessons, but I would want her to stay shorter, like, lesser lessons, but still learn them. So yeah, you'll be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's a good point there, Ken. So it's this stigma that people tend to have, um, when they're going through, situations like that. Maybe when they leave, what society might say or how they might be perceived, and so they rather stay in and go through hell, right? Instead of raising their hand or crying for help. Why should that not be the case for a lot of people who are enduring, for all the right reasons, right? They want to stay and give life a second chance for whatever, but I think there comes a time when enough is enough, and we're not condoning, that people, leave their marriages or whatever. But what we're trying to say here is, to your point, right? Stay shorter, right? Don't stay in for the long haul, and especially if you're hurting, if you know there's some help
Yeah.
that you can get, right? Can
Yeah.
you speak to that as we kind of wrap this up?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm now in an amazing committed relationship with a partner who, I mean, I think it was great because I came into this one without hiding anything, from my past or feeling any shame about that. So that's a really powerful place to be when you can talk about those things that would have defined you in previous relationships because it was unhealed, had an impact. Now it's just part of the tapestry, right? That makes up, the story of who I am and how I got here. It's interesting conversation, right? And I think, I'm here and, like there isn't an option of an out, mostly because I've come into it setting very different boundaries because of past relationships where I didn't have boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to communicate what I want, what I need, who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little, less unapologetic, right? Like I'm like, this is who I am. This is what I'll tolerate. This is what I won't tolerate. And so unfortunately, you don't attract what you want. You attract who you are.
Yes.
And that's such a big thing. That's the whole radical responsibility. I had to own that. I ignored the niggle. I went into that relationship unhealthy. I didn't do the work. If I'd done the work, like I said, I might have been 4 months in and went, whoo, I need to peace out. And then I'd been grateful for the lesson and I would have avoided, all of the mess there. And how much more so if the person, because I think hurt people. What if my partner had done some work? Right. So I think, we undermine when we're working on ourselves, the impact of that. In fact, I chatted with a gal the other day who called me specifically because she's in a relationship and she was like, do I leave? And I get that question a lot when people are talking to me. Should I go? Should I do what you did and just peace out? And I have to remind them, I'm like, look, I stayed for 4.5 years and he had to leave. It wasn't me that left. I didn't have the courage to do that, even though it was bad and I knew it was bad. Or, other relationships where I stayed at least 2.5 years too long. I said, that's not the question we should be asking today. Today, it's how did you contribute to the fight you just had? What patterns do you guys have engaged in your relationship? What are you doing to work on it? Don't worry about him. You got to fix you first. So go tell yourself the truth about what you want, who you are, how you're impacting the situation. Go read a book, and I recommend a few, and they're all on my website of ones that have had huge impact on me. Get grounded, get sorted, make sure you're not contributing to the problem. And I said, I guarantee, even if you decide you're leaving anyway, you will do it from a place that isn't traumatic, that isn't emotionally charged. You'll do it from a very powerful, grounded place. And the other person will likely say, you know what, you're right. That's different. And that's, I think, what I was getting at about the whole thing is it's not about whether you stay or leave. It's whether or not you're good with you. Because when you change you, everything else changes, even if you decide to leave, or maybe you have the courage to have a conversation that matters, and that changes everything too.
Wow. What a powerful perspective. A few things that stuck out. You mentioned the best revenge is a life well lived. You attract who you are, not what you want. And when you change you, everything changes. Candice, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing not only your personal life experience, right, but the lessons and how this can benefit all of us, really. And I trust that our listeners have found this to be tremendously valuable. I have. And if you have, this is really why we do what we do. Right, Candice, before we go, can you share your website with our audience and where they can learn more information about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just CandiceSmiley.com. So CandiceSmiley. That's it. They can find all my connections, all my social media, and more links to my stories right there. So, Fred, thank you. Thank you so much for hosting the show today.
Pleasure's all mine, and I really appreciate you. Stay well, stay safe, and to your listeners, until next time, stay well. Thank you.